speaking after such eminent people is that they seem to have said everything that really needs to be said. Next time I'm going to insist on going first. Thank you very much. It's fascinating to listen to everybody and the distinct angles that have been brought up so far. Yes, I have been a parent who homeschooled my own child. I was in the tea plantations as a young mother, and before my children went off to boarding school, I actually homeschooled them, and I know the challenges firsthand. I had no other influences and no one else to help me, and that really taught me about how to be a parent and a teacher, and that's what started me off on my journey. I've been teaching at the British School in New Delhi, the O-level and A-level courses in English and drama. And then I suddenly decided that I wanted to teach children of early years because I wanted to start the journey instead of concluding the school journey. So I went off to Indonesia and joined Kinderland Indonesia. I was fortunate enough to be given my early childhood education with Kinderland Singapore and put through my paces as head of center in Indonesia. It's marvelous because now I'm setting up early centers with the Sri Ram Group. I've set them up with Learn Today as well. And what I have finally found out is that no matter what the curriculum is, and I've dealt with such wonderfully detailed curricula, whether they were in Indonesia or Singapore or in India, marvelous curriculum. But when it comes to transaction, that's where the problem lies. And I'm sure everybody who's been a teacher or a parent knows that there's a big difference when it comes to practice. So let's look at the things which we tend to take for granted. And I'm just going to go over this very, very quickly. Now, as a parent, and when you're thinking about your preschool, your child's preschool, you're thinking about balanced diets and things like that. Now, in the Sri Ram schools, we actually decided to take that away from the parents because we don't know what's happening at home, possibly junk food. So we end up having our own nutritionally based diet for children. So that's the one essential thing that we decided to do for all our schools, is that snack, which is fairly substantial and keeps the children engaged. Now, the other angle with having the snack in school is that you're teaching a whole lot of other skills along with it. Not just skills, but attitudes. How to behave with other people while eating. How not to grab for food. How not to waste food. I remember learning that at my grandmother's knee, waste not, want not, but that seems to have, you know, just fallen by the wayside these days. So all of these very critical aspects of attitude are taught during that session. Bodily care. Are we teaching our children to really look after themselves? I know there are plenty of Montessori exercises, lacing and so forth. But are we just saying, Aya ke saath bhej do, wo karegi? Or are we actually taking the trouble to teach the child bodily hygiene? Are we teaching them how to do that? In addition to that, I feel rest is critical. Children may be in school, if you're looking at the early childhood descriptor of up to the age of 8, in the Sri Ram school, they're there for 7 hours when it comes to class 1. You need time to revive, to rest, to recharge. So do they have a nook where they can all just lie down and have some fun? Just lie down, recharge their batteries. I think that's really important. And of course, you're looking at all the other things like movement. Is there enough music? Is there enough rhythm, even when going from classroom to classroom? Are you encouraging that? Because a lot of children who are fidgety need reasons to move. So just penning them up in a classroom is not the answer. I think the answer is to give children the opportunity to move with a purpose. And that is where I think that, you know, the teacher training for how to transition between classes is so important. Safety. Have we really looked at what our schools are providing? Are the toys too large to swallow? Are they non-toxic? Do they have rounded edges? You know, basic things like that, which I find are critical. We take really good care to see that that happens. at least we check the maker's instructions. Do we have, for example, in the toilets, do we have the cleaning materials put away? Are we really looking into these details, which then lifts our school into a place of safety, actual safety for our children? So all of these things are, according to me, critical if you're looking at the whole child. Am I missing this? Right. Now from safety, we're looking at security. Now when I'm talking about security, I don't mean the Darwans and the guards. I don't mean parent authorization cards, all of which are also important. What I'm talking about is emotional security. Does your child have the ability or the courage to take risks? And I'm talking about emotional risks. Are they being given an environment where they can reach out to the teacher, reach out to their peers, and know that their questions will be considered? Sitting down together, for this is really important. Do we want a yes-man society? No, this is not colonial times. We're not looking at a nation of babus. We're supposed to be looking at an environment which raises children who can think, who can debate, who can critically examine ideas. That's not going to happen if they've been taught to keep quiet in class because they don't have the courage to speak up. And of course, if you see that picture, I mean, all of these pictures are from our own schools. It's the companionship, the social and emotional growth which you get by actually interacting with children, your peers, where, I mean, no man's an island. I totally believe that. So even if your child is a loner, the child needs to have an environment where they can interact with their peers through play, which is so non-threatening if actually guided right. Then we're looking, of course, at our cognitive needs. And here, when I'm talking about literacy in the classroom, I'm talking about opportunities. What I have seen in some of my visits to schools where I've been invited is that it's rather random. You know, you do have a curriculum, but whether it's been actually followed, whether the objectives of that class have actually been thought of, that's a big question mark. Normally what's just happening is children are in there, there is a topic, the teacher is going through the motions, teaching the topic, children perform, but I don't think there's been actual thought of what was to be achieved in that lesson specifically. So what I'm trying to talk about is give children the opportunity to learn, and it doesn't mean huge infrastructure. All our schools, for example, they have plenty of books in the classroom. If there is a task that the child is actually finished with, the child can go to the literacy center, pick up something, engage with it. Instead of, you know, creating situations in classrooms that teachers really complain about, which I have a child who's a nuisance, he's fidgety, he disturbs other children. Well, I think somewhere along the line we have to check whether our environment has been set up properly. When I talk about challenge, I mean moderate challenge. I don't mean throwing something at a child which will cover him with disaster. You know, he can't succeed. It's much, much too difficult. So in our schools, we really have a lot of attention paid to differentiation. And when I'm talking about differentiation, I'm talking about not just teaching to the center, but having opportunities for the slower learner to actually come up to the rest, and opportunities for the really fast, bright child to be challenged further. And what we really tell our teachers is, for heaven's sake, don't give the bright one who's finished their work just one more worksheet of the same. There is nothing more demotivating for a bright child, because he's going to think, oh God, maine jaldi kyun khatam kiya, ek aur mil gaya. So that's not the answer when I talk about differentiation. I mean something to puzzle the child. Give him something that really is not in sync with the rest of the lesson, something different to engage the child with. And of course, games. I mean, I'm sure that a child who is playing and has learning games at his fingertips is a child who really enjoys school. All right, now a lot of our curriculum deals, when we're talking about cognitive needs, and we're talking about the whole child. A lot of our influences are very IB, so we look at inquiry at a really early age. I'm talking about at 3+. I'm giving you an example of what I think is inquiry at 3+. All right? And you're talking about water. If you have a glance at the screen, you will see the number of activities and how holistically the whole idea of water has been treated. You know, there is kinesthetic activity here. Children are going around, they're trying to identify what a puddle is, create a puddle in your own school. Take them there, take them for outings to see what a pond can be like, show them some things that you can't access physically on the screen. Now, this whole concept about water flowing, we take it for granted that it flows downwards, but that is a concept, right? So show them how water flows. Let them understand the concept. Experience the different states of water, all right? Let them use it for watering. Show them, you know, take them into the garden, let them water the plants. Now, when you're looking at, so that's the environment angle. And then, of course, washing their own hankies, squeezing them, things like that. Now, I can see teachers actually nodding because you know what's happening. When you're squeezing, you're using your fine motor skills. Using a dropper, again, is a skill that will be really useful for them later. Hygiene, washing their faces, collecting water, and things like estimation, which didn't exist as a topic when I was in school. It does exist now. I don't know about other people, but I do know that having good estimation or andaz is an unrivaled skill. Try to get them to do that at nursery level. Imagine how many glasses would fit into a jug of water and get them to actually do it. So, as you can see, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about practical ways of encouraging inquiry as early as nursery. Now I'm getting into a very controversial topic, control versus freedom. And that is where all this creative expression that we keep talking about is rooted. Now, I must tell you something about Singapore, because I learned ECE. You may say the sky is blue, but when the child is actually drawing his own painting, he make it black. And you ask him why, don't just ignore it, ask him why. Because I've done that. And they said, but it's raining outside. And, you know, and when you talk to children, you get them to express their ideas, there is vocabulary developing, there is an opinion and the ability to communicate, which is hugely required in this day and age. So, yes, and the other thing which I introduced in all the schools in the Sri Ram group is messy play. I don't think children can really learn about textures without messing themselves up. पहले ज़माने में कहते थे ना मट्टी के पास होना चाहिए. I mean, the child has to have connection, physical connection with things, right? And especially if you read Piaget and you're talking about 0 to 2, everything is to do with the senses. And I say that unless a child learns what slippery is, what rough is, and jelly is, and they actually feel it, all of these things are just going to be vocabulary items and not real. So what we're talking about here is, when you know, experiential learning is the catchphrase now. Well, I'm talking about really experiential. They have to feel it. And we warn parents, even though the children are wearing aprons, they're going to come home in a mess. And you should be prepared for it. Now, parents are marvelously cooperative, I will say that. Okay. We had this huge debate when we were setting up our schools about scripted curricula, and whether we should have curricula which actually, you know, map the day from the beginning to the end, 20 minutes of this and half an hour of this, and exactly how to enter the room, exactly how to start a topic and conclude it. Let me say we decided we wouldn't go that way. And why not? We have a very, very good curriculum. We have objectives for every topic. We have a series of activities which we give all our teachers. We have a month of training and then monitoring visits and interventions throughout the year. So we're doing all of that. And the reasons why we decided to do it, because children are different. If you really believe in child-centric education, and if you really believe that your curriculum has to adapt to a child, your methods have to adapt to the kind of class you have, then how on earth are you going to go with these minutely scripted curriculum? I don't see, I mean, this is, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who argue with this, because, but this is the way we think, that if you've got a school in Rohtak and you have a school in Tarapur like we do, the needs are different. The teaching is different. The children are different. Parental expectations are different. So now we come to this whole notion of how to manage these parents and their expectations. Well, we actually have lots and lots of workshops with parents. That's how we do it. Because imagine a curriculum like this coming into a fairly rural area. It's difficult to understand. And there could be a disconnect unless you have parents on board. I know I'm really sort of talking a lot, but let me show you the example of what we did in Jakarta. In early years, not in early years, but in primary, we had a lot of innovative work given to the students, where we expected the children to go home and surf the net, get information from the internet, source it, and review it, and summarize it. We found it didn't work. We found the parents didn't encourage it at all. So it looked like our whole notion of research at home was actually falling apart. That's when we had our first meeting with parents, and we asked them why. Very simple. Miss, if we give the access to the computer to our children, we are very scared that they will get onto porn and all these other websites. So we don't want that. So I said, are you going to stop them getting onto the net altogether? They said yes. And that really created a whole lot of problems for us. So our answer was this. We had free software on how to block objectionable sites. We called the parents for a workshop in our computer lab. I have never had so much of involvement of parents in my whole life than I did that time. We had something like 75 parents trying to crowd into our computer lab. We had 3 parents to a computer, all of them jockeying, and then we had to treat them like children, saying, please take turns. All right? But they each went off with a CD, which we taught them how to actually execute, to implement on to install in their computer. And we got over this problem through this kind of activity. So this is just to tell you how much one needs to get parents involved and not just complain, but see what the issues are and then invite them in and create that sense of community. And I really do believe in the whole sense of community, which is, when you look at it, very Reggio Emilia. Each teacher is a researcher in themselves. Each family has to be connected to the environment. Each child can, you can have a classroom outside and connect with the environment in the best way possible. So we do encourage this, stepping out of the 4 walls of a classroom, going out and actually letting the environment be the space. And finally, since we have so many schools, and they're different, and the structure might be different, the infrastructure. For me, it's not the infra, really. It's what kind of learning spaces you've created, whether you've set up the environment for learning. If you don't have a sandpit, so what? Have a sand tray. If you do not have a paddle pool, so what? Is it really important? I don't think so. I think what's really important is that no matter how much space you have, and by the way, you don't need huge halls in any case for early childhood. They like cozy spaces. So are we getting too involved in this whole notion of infra? I think we are. And somewhere along the line, I feel that the basic learning element seems to get lost in this whole litany of infrastructure that we're providing. So whereas I'm happy if we get infrastructure. I'm happy if we get a large library. But I'd be much happier if that library were used for actual reading and books were not shut up behind, those old Godrej kind of cupboards, where actual access to those books, access to material is closely guarded, because every single book that you're paying for as part of the school log is so precious. For me, the infrastructure is only good as the number of children who are using it and the value you get out of it. So if you have the infrastructure and you're locking it up, there is something seriously wrong in the way education is being managed. And finally, I'm going to leave you with this notion. In the year 2000, you had two wonderful people called Costa and Kalec who talked about how important it is to have the right habits of mind. This was something I did a mini thesis on. And I've actually adapted those 16 habits of mind for early years. And this is what I came up with for early years, because I genuinely believe it's the whole notion of attitudes and not content. As we've heard before, content is available very, very easily. So what do we want? Do we want kids who are rote learners, or do we want kids who can access learning, kids who want to learn, kids who can solve problems, who can communicate with their friends, make decisions, have opinions? That's what we want. So these are the habits of mind that if anybody please, you can get onto Google and look at Costa and Kalec, and you'll possibly be, and if you've already read it, wonderful. If you haven't, then it's very interesting to read. But this is what we finally adapted for early years overseas, and then finally we whittle those down to what we do at Sri Ram. And if you look at them, some of them have already been talked about. Confidence. People talk about confidence, they talk about, the ability to communicate. I mean, Hitler was a great communicator, wasn't he? We don't want a future of Hitlers. We want children who know what is right, what is compassionate, who know that no matter what their environment throws at them, that a drug is bad, this is not good for you. They know that if somebody is touching them wrong, that this is something to be beware of. There are so many things that we're talking about when we're talking about early years and the importance of getting children to actually, or rather molding the character of children. Thinking out of the box, come on, this is what they need for future careers. Curiosity. And I think I was probably one of the most curious children or students myself, and I remember I've been told this by my teacher, who told my mother, who came back and told me, because I'd forgotten this, is that I believe we were doing the topic of rotation, and the teacher had explained this very nicely with this orange which she was twirling, and I asked the teacher, well, if we're going round and round, why don't we feel it? And the poor woman didn't really have an answer. I feel sorry for her because I don't think she was prepared for this kind of a question. It took a while, but she did get back to me, and she didn't talk about Einstein's relativity and all of that. She did explain it in very, very simple words. I'm going to leave you with this idea. If you have a youngster in class 1 who asks you this question, what are you going to answer? Please ponder. And you also answer things like, if there is down under in Australia, it is at the bottom of the earth and all of that, and why don't we fall off? And so somebody said gravity, and they said, but aren't you still upside down? So I'm asking you to look at all these questions, because that's what's coming at you. You need to be flexible. You need to have non-stereotypical answers, because you really need to understand the concept yourself. And children are going to test you every minute. They can spot somebody who's not sure from very far away, whether it's at home or in school. So if you don't know something, come clean. I do that all the time, and I said, hang on, I've got to think about this. I shall get back to you. So collaboration, very, very important. We're looking at new models of leadership for the future and of today. Children have to be able to work in teams, so a lot of the work you do is collaborative in nature. But if you see this, this is one of our Montessori activities where we're looking at concentration, we're looking at finishing a task, we're looking at quiet learning and working independently. So what I believe is that your activities have to be really well balanced, to have a combination of collaborative work that requires a lot of talking, some that requires focus and concentration, because I think that is as important. By the way, I don't like rote learning, but I do think memory is very, very important. And I'm very Asian that way. And I think that it's extremely important to actually groom memory, because once you've learned a concept, you still have to remember it. And let's not really forget that important. And finally, I'm leaving you with this notion, which I think parents need to think about, educators need to think about, is, are we making this all too serious? Are we making it all so intense that learning has stopped being fun? In our school, if you want to punish a child, a parent says you're not going to school. I say that very, very proudly. And that's it. They have to want to learn to go to school because they are learning, they are communicating, and they're having fun. So if you read what Glenn Doman says, it's interesting. It's the greatest game in life and the most fun. All children are born believing this and will continue to believe this unless we convince them that learning is hard work and unpleasant. Some kids never really learn this lesson and go through life believing that learning is fun and the only game worth playing. So we have a name for such person. We call them geniuses. And here's to having lots and lots of geniuses in our schools. And thank you very much for listening to me. Okay.